Very cool.
Now,
Thank you.
I noticed you didn't broach the subject of how he died.
No. But we believe that he fell on a sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want proof of that, you look in what verse is it? Acts 1:18, where they're saying, now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity. Falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and his bowels gushed out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's where that comes from. You know, an interesting thing, Don, about the sword that Peter drew, that word sword can also be knife.
Mm-hmm.
It was his fisherman's knife that he drew, not not like one of the swords the Romans had, because it was illegal for anybody to have those other than soldiers. But they did have a long curved knife that they used for fishing, and that's what Peter drew out and chopped off the ear with.
Well, that would explain why he was walking around in fear the whole evening. You know, every time somebody thought they knew who he was, he denied it because they thought, you know, he'd be arrested perhaps for carrying that big knife. Who knows?
Yeah, you know. Well, his knife for fishing would have been within the law, I'm sure. But, you know, he still was carrying it around with him because he was scared.
Yep.
Obviously. It's such a, you know, that's one of the most if you watch any of the movies, when Jesus Christ is on the cross, Judas goes and hangs himself. It's always while he's being crucified.
Well, I just can't believe the teachings I'm getting out of these fellowships from Don, and Michael.
Yeah, well, next week I swallow some crow.
Don, I don't think I've ever heard that besides just reading the word laid out so beautifully and simply and so much truth and understanding. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow. You're welcome.
I will pay you the highest compliment I can think of. I think you laid out better than Dr. Werewolf did.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you did. Even to me, that was very, and your dialect was perfect and everything. I mean, it was very concise, and that's going to be a very blessed teaching for a lot of people for years to come, my friend.
Yes.
Your heart and everything is just beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Cool.
There's prophecies that relate to. It even says that it may be fulfilled concerning Judas's betrayal and ultimately his death. One of them's in Zechariah, but even those prophecies are very general and are related to things that were going on during that time. And I say that because they did not have to come true for him. And the only point that I would raise the question is what resurrection will Judas be in? Because there are certain statements made because he did inevitably reject the salvation that was going to become available, which is Jesus. It's all through Jesus Christ. And again, I think about how many people in today's Christian society think they're unworthy to receive God's blessings. I'm just not good enough, which is very true. You ain't. But the point is that's what grace is all about. But how many people walk away from that and they don't receive it. Even I've heard people that I have personally ministered to, trying to get them to do Romans 10:9 and 10, accept Jesus Christ as Lord. And their primary reasoning for not doing that is because they looked at their life and they felt so unworthy to even do that, because it's not even the fact that they didn't think that it was possible. It's the fact that they looked at their own self-worth and said, I am just not worthy. And the way you portrayed both emotionally and intellectually Judas's heart, because he was just so overwhelmed with that grief. I think we all have. I have seen that in my day and time, to where people have done such horrible things in their life that they just look at salvation and say, I'm not worthy. Mm-hmm. And therefore they refuse to accept what God has provided in the same manner that Judas did. Paul could have done the same thing. When he got knocked off his ass, off his ass. I don't remember.
Off of something. He was riding something.
He was going on the road. Some more. He could have very easily walked away from that and said, I'm not. But he never neglected in his ministry to show that he knew he wasn't worthy. He was the least of all saints. He was the chief of sinners, he called himself. But because of God's grace, I even take it one step further, Don, and I'd say that Judas would have been the perfect messenger for the administration of grace. Mm-hmm. Because who else would be able to stand up and say, you think you're not worthy? Check me out. Now, Paul was, most of us could qualify, I guess, but Paul was definitely a qualifier too, and he uses that to illustrate God's love, kindness, and grace. But Judas, oh my goodness, the very man that betrayed the Lord with a kiss, being born again and saved, what a witness that would have been if that man could have just got over it. Mm-hmm. So, and you did that very well. That's what touched my heart out of what you showed today, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
You know, it's interesting. I heard this one person do a teaching, and they contended that Matthias wasn't supposed to be the 12th apostle. It was supposed to be Paul. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, if you think about some of the things he said, I am one that is born out of due season. He wasn't there to witness what Christ did while he was here on earth.
You know, and you could do 100 teachings on this, because I've got one on my mind, and that's a beautiful point, Don, as to where what man does when he takes things in his own hand. Don even mentioned that today concerning Judas. Judas was trying to put the Lord in a position where he had to act. He thought, if the Lord is in a position where he had that, he'll wipe these fools out and get them out of our face, and we'll bring that kingdom in. He was probably one of the strongest believers. The Lord trusted him with the purse. I mean, goodness gracious. But anyways, there's a thing along with that, with what you just said about Matthias, and there's also a thing. Do you remember when Moses' father-in-law taught him how to organize things better? Well, if you look at that and you really read those records on that, that turned out to be really bad because it didn't work. And then right after that, you have God choosing the 70, and it was actually 72 because 2 people started prophesying out in the camp. But when God did it, it turned out to be very good. In other words, man tries to do it by his own reckoning and wisdom. And you said it today when we were talking earlier. When I try to work everything out for myself, I have all these issues, and it's hard, and it's toiling and things don't go right. But when I go to God first and allow Him not to take over, not to do everything, but to work together with Him, because that's what He truly desires from what the Word says. He doesn't want to take away all your pain and suffering. He wants to work together with you to work through situations, to be a witness to His Son Jesus Christ. And a lot of teaching in Hebrew scriptures that have been maybe not quite hit the mark is in such as that, because we were taught the way things broke up with that was very wise in what Moses' father-in-law told him to do. And it was, I mean, every business organizes itself in the very same manner today, even as far as corporate executives and the body of the boards that they work with and on down. But when it comes to the best way, it's when you do it together with God, because God knows who those people need to be. And I agree with you. I think you really hit on something with that Matthias thing, and even the casting of lots. That's the way they did things, and that's the way we all do things sometimes. But the Lord picked out His 12th, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that more. And
there's another thing about it too. You hear Matthias mentioned there, and then you never hear about him again.
Nothing. Absolutely.
Not a single thing.
Right. Right.
Now, there's a lot of the apostles, like you don't hear much about Thomas either,
Right.
or Bartholomew. I mean, but we know that they were supposed to be apostles. I wonder sometimes if the guy wasn't right, if Matthias was, just not supposed to be there.
Yeah, and the band broke up pretty early. Within the first 7 years, the 12. I've got the last mention of the 12 documented in the Book of Acts, where it actually says the 12, which another good point that Don brought up about the ones he selected, because they split up pretty early. They split up within the first 7 years, because it goes from speaking of the 12 to speaking of the apostles. And the apostles were people that definitely witnessed the resurrected Lord. But we know from the record that Don shared today from 1 Corinthians that at one time there was 150 people at one time, or
over 500 at one point.
At one time. So these are all witnesses of the resurrected Lord. So there was a lot of apostles out there. There's a lot of people that witnessed that and had the ability to build churches. And I'm sure that they all have their if there would have been a book written about that, it probably would be not enough trees in the forest or papyrus or whatever you want to write about.
Well, don't forget, a lot of those people became the Jewish Christians who tried to stamp out Paul's teachings.
Right. Right.
Because it didn't include operating the law.
Right.
And, we unfortunately have moved on from the law to grace. And now I'm not saying, you go out and live like hell and you've got grace to cover for you. I am not saying that.
No, but grace to get in. I don't have to meet the legal requirements. I just have to meet up with Jesus.
And then do the best you can. And every time you fall down, just get up, dust yourself off, and keep moving.
Saved by grace to do good work. What do you think?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
God should put that in His word somewhere.
Saved unto good works.
Yep. Unto is to do. It's all the way to do the unto do.
Well, with the teaching that Don gave, it also was a great encouragement to continue to move forward.
Yes.
Because God is always with you and always willing to help you. You just have to keep moving forward.
Forget those things which are behind me. Reach forth for those things which are before me. Press it out, baby.
Yeah.
Hey, that's
Press towards the mark.
word too.
We press towards the mark.
Press towards the mark. Beautiful.
Doesn't say we get there, but we press toward it.
Inspirational, Big D. Very inspirational.
Mhm. And
Anyways, I'm going to send you, when I send Dawn the slides tonight after we get off, Dawn, I'm going to send you, I've got the very first slide has the first night and the scripture references for the first day of the week, Sunday, and the scripture references of the sightings, the UFO, the unidentified, I guess it's a UJO, the unidentified object. I want to send it, and if there's anything that you can pipe in on, because I'm going to break this teaching down into 3 teachings and go through the chronological period of those 40 days and just try to give a good summary of not only the Christian writings that we can see, which are part of the Gospels also, because even though they're still under the other covenant, the law, they're still Christian writings. Christians wrote them, and add in some of the Hebrew writings that I think actually fill in a lot of gaps of things that was said that he would do after he got up from the dead. So,
I wonder what he did Saturday night.
well, there's a I was actually talking to Bob. I forget his last name. He's been coming to Tuesday night fellowships, and we were talking about it because I brought it up last week about the appearance to the imprisoned spirits. And a lot of scholars, and I haven't been able to identify a time period for that yet, but most scholars fall back on the same thing, that Jesus would have been in a real hurry to stick that in their face. In other words,
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, to where, hey, I'm here.
Hey guys, guess who's doomed?
Right. So, yeah, exactly, right? So it might have been a pretty early event, even though I still haven't. And it's part of maybe by this time next year, I'll be able to lay it out more detailed, because one thing that I really appreciate from this group in particular is that we're all getting very good in specific areas. And every year, there's a little bit more meat with those potatoes. You know what I mean? Just little things about. I teach AC theory class. I've been teaching it now for over 15 years. The same class, because one thing about physics, it doesn't change much over the last 15 years. The sine wave still goes the way it goes, and I'm very good at it. I'm very, very good at it. I understand it. I've enhanced it. I've got a beautiful presentation. The kids all get really, really, really blessed by what they learn about their trade through my class. And it's because I do the same thing over and over again, and I constantly work. I don't get static with it. I'm going through my last 6 weeks now of school. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back into that class. What can I do better? What am I missing? What questions did they ask? And I don't emphasize that enough. And I think with what we've been attempting to do rather successfully with what we've done on this site for Monday nights, that we've been able to do that. And I'm very blessed to be a part of that, because just to see not only how I've been blessed by your teachings, but to see the personal growth in each one of us by doing that, by just focusing in and working things out and continually going back to them and trying to present it in a more diligent, concise manner. That's what being a Christian is all about. And a lot of people have to wait till the very end of their life to be able to do some of the things that we have been so blessed to be a part of here. So I'm very thankful for you guys. I'll tell you that much.
Same here.
Yeah, very, very thankful. Mhm.
Yes.
I love sitting in your Mike and Don's teachings because I learned so much.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for John bringing up that he was confused about that Nets thing, I would have never went back and looked at that because I was watching y'all's. I wasn't here last week, of course, but Monday morning at work, or about Tuesday morning at work, the first thing I'm doing is watching your teaching. and then when John brought that up, I thought, I heard that somewhere before. There was a discrepancy on the Nets thing, and I looked it up right away and studied it. And as soon as I was sure that as soon as I knew that I knew that I knew, I called Don up right away and said, "Hey, we might want to look at this again." And Don, in his most beautiful, humble manner, wants to check it out and fix it.
Yep, and that's what I'll be doing next week, eating some crow.
And if it wasn't for John Tudor saying, "Hey, I'm looking at this net thing," and then John, he was referring, of course, to the Gospel of John, and then John saying, "Well, it is singular in John," and I thought to myself, I know I heard something else about this before, and I went back and looked at the Mark record, and sure enough, in the Greek, in the Mark record, it's plural and plural. They did exactly. So I started looking up fishermen and fish, and all of a sudden all these Hebrew scriptures opened up to where it talked about the millennial kingdoms and specifically concerning the fishermen and their fish and the busting of the nets and the overwhelming abundance of
Yeah.
fish. And I thought, what a witness that would have been to those fishermen for the Lord to do that to them. And it's prophetically right out of the scriptures that they would have known and understood it. And I mean, they were fishermen. So, I mean, those fishermen scriptures were probably more precious than most because they touched their heart more because that's what they were. And they would have known those. So that's why in the second account, when after the resurrection, Peter wraps himself up and jumps out of the boat, man, because he says, "It's the Lord, it's the Lord." He remembered that original witness of the Lord. He was so excited, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Bless.
That's what John's job is here, to keep us honest and on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, and sometimes it really pisses me off when he does it because I have to eat crow.
Yeah. Well, that's his job, so as long as he's doing it, that's fine.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
That's why, John, I don't object when you bring up questions,
Oh God, no.
because it makes us look at it again, too.
Absolutely. I love you guys. I gotta go to bed.
Okay, I was just going to say,
Good night.
All right.
let me close it out. So everybody,